Welcome to the Into AI Safety podcast, where we document my shift to a career in AI safety. This show aims to serve as a mentorship proxy for those getting into the field, and a mentorship amplifier for our guests and myself. As always, I am your host, Jacob Haynes. During the podcast, you may hear this sound, which denotes that I have included at least one link related to the content that preceded the sound. The purpose of this is to allow for citations and providing resources without breaking the flow of conversations. As per usual, items mentioned during asides will have links in the show notes as well. Also, just a heads up, there is a little bit of artifacting going on in my audio for this episode. Sorry about that. I've now resolved that problem and it won't be an issue moving forward. Today, we have a guest joining us that I met during the team formation of an evals hackathon in November, and she was amazing to have on the team. We actually won first place with the work that we did, and I recorded the audio for our team meetings. So, you will get to hear all about that research in upcoming episodes. She's from Ottawa, Canada, and is currently focused on mechanistic interpretability. Don't worry, we'll drill into what that means with her soon. So without further ado, let's have our first interview.
Hi, I'm Alice. My pronouns are she, her. I also go with they, them.
So the first question I wanted to ask is just like, how did you get involved in AI safety, and as sort of what's your origin story?
My origin story started, about a year ago, and it's not the most wholesome, but after graduating from a master's degree, I was like, I need a job, and programming makes money, but I don't know how to program. So I'm going to take, the next however many months it takes to learn programming and grind projects and then have a stunning resume and then make money. That was the plan. And then after 6 months of this going like reasonably well, but also putting too many eggs in one basket and like getting like pissed off about certain like interview outcomes, the immediate precursor to my AI safety work is joining Eleuther AI, which is like a nice big open research platform for AI. And they had this LM evals project that I joined for a bit and then abandoned shortly after when I learned about mechanistic interpretability. And then in May or so May this year, I found mechanistic interpretability, and I've just been doing that all the time since. It's just so fascinating of a field, and that's leads me here basically, just doing that nonstop for 6 months.
Okay, awesome. So when you've described it previously, you don't just say mechanistic interpretability. You added some other words onto that, so I'm like, what are those, and what does that mean?
So I don't come from I don't come from an EA background where like it seems like most of the AI safety or a lot of the AI safety work is sort of originated, but I found out about like the existence of this field at all. People, it's a subject worth focusing on in April, around when I was on the Eleuther AI server. And then I just basically had broad skepticism over like whether it's, relevant at all. And then I think it was what convinced me was a bunch of interviews with people online, basically, who seem to have like good epistemics on how they reason about what's important and how they derive their own conclusions and stuff like that.
Okay.
So, yeah, but like personally, I haven't done much AI safety stuff outside of interpretability.
Gotcha. Okay, and so then if I was to just, if you were to walk up to me and you needed to explain what you're doing right now, like, what would the elevator pitch be?
The pitch for interpretability is that we're trying to fully reverse engineer large neural networks so that in the end game, we can point to anywhere in a neural network and give a faithful description of what it's doing there, and furthermore, on a given input, understand exactly how the model is thinking.
Okay, so my question then, and you touched on this a little bit with like you just think it's fascinating, but why have you chosen this area specifically? Like, what about it is fascinating, or what about it makes you excited?
It's so freaking cool. I think, I get a lot of skepticism when talking to new people about mechanistic interpretability. Like, I'm not super good at making the pitch myself. There's a lot of skepticism over like, there's no way that this is like tractable of an endeavor. But then the fascinating thing is that it does seem to be tractable. Personally, I have like a mathy background. I used to just only like pure math, and I avoided applied things. But I think it's a really nice sort of like, even if you disregard the applicability to, like, if you don't consider it tractable as an approach for AI safety, it's still in itself a very, very rich area, like an endeavor, scientific endeavor, basically. It's like neuroscience, microbiology, but we have much better instruments to measure them. How much further can we get in neuroscience if we can perfectly capture the brain and have all of its weights? We don't have that for brains, but we have like a really, really good setting for neural networks. How much further can we take it? And it seems pretty far.
Gotcha. Okay. And then right now, are you working on any projects that you can talk about?
Yeah, I'm pretty open about the projects that I'm working on. What I'm currently working on right now is I'm trying to piece together, I guess, two disparate, separate, I guess, paradigms or views of interpretability. To give a bit of backstory, there was a team at Google Brain / OpenAI back in like 2015 to 2017, or maybe up till 2020, that initially tried to really tackle full internal interpretability on image models, vision models. And they created this unique exposition journal called the Distill Hub.
So, Distill was a scientific journal that operated from 2016 to 2021. The website has tons of incredibly high-quality articles for understanding foundational concepts in machine learning. Each page has well-designed visualizations and is written in an approachable manner. There are even some interactive demos which help facilitate understanding. I can't recommend these articles enough. Even for experienced machine learning researchers, it is great to revisit foundational concepts.
And there's these really, really fascinating articles on there that are all interactive and visual and super, super awesome. And they make the original case that full end-to-end understanding of really large neural networks is like tractable, and they show some like initial evidence for why to care and how you might go about doing this. And they have a particular view on how to go about studying, particular, sub models, subgraphs, some big computational tree or graph of a neural network, which works well in the image domain, but it doesn't work well in the NLP domain. And so there was a separate sort of attack vector, I guess, of people doing mechanistic interpretability on text models, but they use a completely different approach. And there was no obvious way to rectify these, because one of them was like built on sort of differential approaches that you have naturally in the image domain, and you don't have them in the text domain. There's a few other things that make things harder, but like essentially you have natural things that come up in the image domain that just do not come up in text. And so
Okay.
they used separate paradigms and separate like tools to describe the phenomena that's happening. But I really think that nowadays we do have the technology and we do have the means to unify these two approaches. And I think this is like a really, really valuable approach. So that's like my main agenda right now.
Interesting. Okay, and how are you, I guess, like working towards that right now?
I have like groups, like I run a reading group on mechanistic interpretability, and I have people that I collaborate with that I can just have open dialogues with, and it's really nice. So even though I'm not like situated in like the research clusters like Berkeley or London, I still have nice areas and pockets to talk with people and exchange ideas with. Uh, I write memos, I write scratch code, I show it to people, and sometimes I co-work with them, and this works pretty well.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And then, yeah, we kind of touched on this as well already, but just in terms of how you got to where you are now, were there any like specific approaches that maybe you didn't do at first, but then once you did, you felt were really valuable, or like suggestions?
Honestly, I think the biggest trap is reading too much literature. You should skill up, but not too much. Because I like, on one hand, skilling up or like absorbing and ingesting all of the literature might like steer you away from like novel ideas, which may be really dumb, but also may be very novel. It also just there's no proxy for like getting your hands dirty, especially with mechanistic interpretability. But I imagine with other like strands of AI safety as well, in that you kind of just need to like do things and get immediate feedback loops. So I fell into this trap to some extent, but I think not too much, which is good. But I could have done more of just like trying to implement a paper or just spending like an hour just like coming up with rapid fire a bunch of really really dumb ideas and don't like prune any of them. Just keep them all. Uh, this is like just generally good practice, basically.
Yeah, no, I think I get what you're saying there. So from what I've experienced, the easiest thing feels like to just read a bunch, and to some extent that's valuable. But like after a fairly shallow investigation into that literature, I feel like people are in a good place to start getting their hands dirty. It's just really hard to like take the initiative to know what to do. Um,
Yeah. So I can only really speak for interpretability, but there's a big trap of people wanting to skill up, for example, in like mathematics. So like I don't think my foundations in mathematics are good enough. So the thing is, yes, there is some like threshold of like math you should know, but it's not very high. To actually do good work in interpretability, the important skill is the ability to get your hands dirty and to mess around with internals. And so there's a limit to what you can say with theory, and the limit is pretty low for how impactful that can really be. For sure, having like a strong intuition to guide decision making and getting hunches on where to look is valuable, but it's not something you explicitly study for. There's a very long tail of diminishing returns for studying deeply into mathematics or other fields, for sure, it would be excellent to pull domain experts into this field who already have done the 10 years of studying and convince them to work here. But for the doing part of interpretability, it's really the intuition that gets you the most bang for your buck.
right. And the way to build that is to just start doing things.
Yeah, well, like, you can get the first 30% work intuition for linear algebra and calculus by going through with like a three blue, one brown playlist. And
Right.
then, that takes a few hours or a few days or a couple weeks of study. And then you can get another 20% by taking 1 or 2 semesters of like honors mathematics courses. And then you can maybe get another 20% by doing the full degree in grad school. And then maybe the last 30% you can get by working for a professor for 10 years. And it's like, as far like it's like a really like heavy-tailed skewed. So I think the fact that you can get 30% through like 20 hours of effort rather than 20 weeks or 20 years, I think you should just take your 20 hours and then don't look deeper, basically.
Gotcha. Okay. So the reason that I wanted to have you on as like a guest for this specific episode is that I know that you just applied for a bunch of different research programs and like mentorship programs recently, and I did as well. And I also wanted to talk about like what that process was like and your thoughts on that in general. I guess first, like, what were the things that you applied for, and why did you apply for them? Like, what's the value that you see in attending some of these programs?
So, God, I don't want to sound arrogant or something like that, but
We can cut it later if you really dislike it.
um, personally, I wasn't sure what kind of stuff I could get out of the mentorship because I wasn't sure like whether I would work well with a mentor, and it wasn't clear to me like what the express function of this was. But I think this is probably a pretty minority opinion. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask for this.
Well, but you still did it.
Yeah, I still did it.
And so, like, so why? I think that it makes it even more interesting. Of like, you're maybe hesitant about it, but you still did it, and it's a relatively significant amount of effort to apply to as many as I know you did. So, like, what was the reasoning if you're not sure about it?
So I know that the mentors themselves have like significant experience in producing good work. Like I exclusively applied to the ones that I know and respect the work that they do. And I guess one benefit, even if you're unsure on like the explicit form of mentorship or how well you'll vibe together, is that at the very least you can ensure that the way that they think is like quite different from you, and this is valuable to have like a higher variance of like ideas discussed in general. But like obviously, or maybe not obviously, it's not clear whether this is like enough motivation. But there's also a lot of other skills that I lack, like managing complex projects. There's a lot of uncertainty, I guess.
Yeah, no, and I think that's totally fair too. So the value that I see is not, I guess, like direction. I think there would be some of that, and I think that like it's probably a net positive for the field in general that like some more experienced people are providing more explicit direction to some individuals. But the part that I really think I would get from this kind of thing is mentorship regarding like research process and like thinking
Yeah.
about how to choose problems to address.
Yeah.
And I think that that is something that's really difficult to get without, I mean, it just requires time, but it requires less time if you can work with someone who's already spent time building that skill.
Yeah. Definitely like one thing that I've encountered, like I have a pretty like unconventional sort of background, but like I don't really have any like proper research background. But through doing a bunch of sort of stuff independently, I've been thrown into this process, and man, it's really hard to do like research the right way.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, like I was like, oh well, looks like I'll just have to write a paper. But it's like, wow, these guys have insane expectations, and also like formalizing your thoughts in a way that there's like no way to like completely unanimously unambiguous is really difficult. And
Yeah.
structuring it in a way that doesn't have gaping holes in it, like it's kind of like test-driven development in like programming, where you have some sort of methodological process to make sure that when the later code that you write will be as easy as the earlier code to write. And like having the proper analog in like open-ended research domains. It's really hard to get right without guidance.
Yeah. I totally agree. And so that's sort of like why I applied, and it sounds like, although maybe a little bit more vague, that's sort of the idea that you were having as well. Yeah, I'm curious, who did you apply for? And you gave a sort of a general reason of like, because I've valued their work, but if there's anything in particular about them as well.
Both, I think the two main things is having a boss that has high expectations of me. That's like probably the main one. Like having a boss that has
Okay.
high expectations, but the ones that I particularly chose were like the ones that would I leaned towards ones that have more flexibility in the ideas that I choose.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe this is just out of like personal comfort, um, and maybe that's actually suboptimal for my path. But yeah, I looked at some of like I think it was particularly valuable to look at the descriptions in, for example, Serimats or other research advisors. Some of them had like documents on like what success generally looks like on projects with this person, or like what they
Hmm.
look for in an ideal candidate, or like what does the ideal workflow look like. And this helped contextualize and helped give me a sense for like what to get out of them. And it seems like there's a lot to get out of it, but that they just weren't obvious to me going in.
Once you've decided, like, okay, this is someone that I want to apply for, um, there are these applications and they vary like pretty significantly in what they require. So do you have any, like, I guess, general advice or thoughts on the process as a whole?
I think the process is pretty flawed, honestly. It seems like for a lot of these programs, it's like the minimum requirement slash thing that they are optimizing for is like being unique.
Interesting. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I don't know if this is like actually correct. I know it's certainly correct for some of them that I applied to. But uh so for example, the application thing that I passed next stage or something like that, or arc evals, uh was like the application process was write 50 to 200 words on your most impressive accomplishments in your life, and like and they don't need to be technical. And it's like this just seems like completely optimizing for uniqueness of person. uh it's hard to say like if it is really like if it really is sort of not restricted to technical endeavors, then they are just looking for like interesting people basically. And I don't know
Right.
exactly how to feel about this.
Okay.
I guess there's other ones that had much more normal procedures. Like for Redwood research, for example, they just did like standard coding assessments. For a lot of Seri mats, they had, at least as a filter, not as a selection criteria, maybe like code signal programming evaluations. Um, but I know for like other ones, like let's say you pass that and they want to challenge you again or something like that. They they have you write an essay on something, and similar to the research pipeline of you have to have your writing to be looking like academic writing. Here it's like you get extra points for having your writing like whatever the EA community gold standard for writing is. And
Right.
I guess this I guess this is an efficient proxy, but you also miss out on like obviously there's a level of speculation here, but this is not necessarily good heuristic.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I guess one thing that I'm interested about is, so like, I know I didn't get into any of the maths programs that I applied to now. Um
And how EA pilled are you? Is
uh
there a direct correlation?
I don't, I mean, I'm newish to, I've been to a conference.
Yeah.
Um and like the purpose of going to that conference and I also went to the virtual conference was to basically try to get more information about different opportunities and to get some questions answered. I did a lot of one-on-ones at the in-person one, and overall, I like really enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty valuable to be able to talk to so many different people, especially in the areas that I'm interested in, like AI governance and AI safety. I saw like a post, and I guess I didn't look at it super in depth, but it had like last year's or the summer stats for like who was accepted into mats in
Yeah.
terms of like what degrees or what degree they had. And like I have a master's degree and I have 2 co-authored papers. And within there they have it said like 10% was master's degree and 5% was PhD degree that they of people they accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'm not saying that I should have been accepted, but I don't think it's clear what they're filtering for. So I found that post again and looked at it more closely. The stats provided were that 30% of participants were students, 88% had at least a bachelor's degree, 10% were actively in a master's program, 10% were actively in a PhD program, and 13% had already obtained their PhDs. Although I did get these stats wrong, I still stand behind my claim that it is not totally clear what the MATS program is filtering for.
Like, it's definitely like a noisy channel, but I think I don't like it. I mean, I am comfortably not EA. I'm comfortably an outlier. So I had the opportunity to visit Berkeley and a bunch of the like in-person research communities involved with like Seri Mats or the other things. There's like an office called Constellation that the Astra Fellowship is running out of, and another thing. Basically, they own this one. They don't own, but they like rent out like floors of a giant building, and so like Constellation owns like floors 11, 12, 13. Seri Mats owns like floor 6, and so Constellation has the penthouse and then looks down on the puny Seri Mats mortals. And
Interesting.
And like pretty much quote unquote everyone is there, and so you can just like go in for lunch, get invited quote unquote for lunch, and then chat with a bunch of people all in one room. And like my human eval heuristic, it's like there's a very very strong like bias towards EA pilled people.
Yes. And I think that's
That has pros and cons, but
yeah, I think it. Yeah, but I definitely think that's true. I guess the part that
it seems like
before it.
out of like let's say out of 500 really talented people, for which 250 are like EA knowledgeable and 250 that are non-EA knowledgeable, it seems like you would take out of them on each side like 5 times more EA people than non-EA people. Like all other things considered. This is like my speculation that in what happens.
Gotcha. And so just making sure I'm understanding, you feel like that is.
I mean, I don't know if it's suboptimal, but like
no. I guess I mean like it's not. Is it intentional, or is that like a correlation? I guess.
I think it's. I mean, it's probably both. Like I don't know. I wouldn't. Probably not the case that people are explicitly searching for people within the in crowd, but
it definitely does feel like if you need to get into the in, like being in the in crowd is beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but like on the net, like if it's like if out of 250 on both sides, like and you're selecting 200 people, you would end up selecting 200 EA and 50 non-EA. Like, if at the end of the day, you get the same amount of like net talent, then it's okay. But it's still like, weird that there is such a heavy bias in the system.
Yeah. Um,
This is just an observation, basically.
yeah, I guess I don't know. I feel like there's potential that some people see it as like an indication of like trying to get involved. Obviously that's not the only indication, but I feel like that is the most visible indication right now. So that might be like part of it too. I guess I don't really know, but it's definitely a weird process. Since you've been there, did it feel like there were any other biases?
Hard to it's really hard to disentangle. Like, the it is true that the EA community, I guess, fosters or encourages like reasonably principled thought processes. Um, they're not like the best. I feel like we could benefit from higher variance in like the kinds of backgrounds and skill sets that people have, or like where they come from.
Yeah.
This is like how I feel about things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that yeah, it's I guess I don't know how let's
So
say
like
we're an
there is a way
experienced
to address this. Like there's a way
Okay.
to address this, which is bad because it's like one of the issues that you can point out, which is like, oh well, you can just have more standardized evaluations, right? This is technically a way to do it if the particularities of the background, aren't as
But at
big.
the same time, I feel like standardized evaluations just don't
After,
capture
yeah,
important like the really important pieces sometimes.
yeah,
So, yeah, I guess the question would be like, okay, so we're in this position. We are, let's say we have, 10, 15 years of experience as researchers, and we're trying to get people involved in the field that we're experts in. Um, Obviously, we don't have infinite time. We have to select for people somehow.
mm,
How to, like, what's the best way to do that?
yeah.
And I don't know the answer. It feels like there are some improvements that can happen for sure. But it's hard to know like what exactly. Yes.
I'm in this situation currently, I guess. I so I did a so I'm a research lead for AI safety camp, starting in January,
Okay.
and I didn't know like how quote unquote official this program was, like or how credible or whatnot. I had a call with Linda Linswer, uh, or like for completely unrelated reasons. Like I just talked to them for advice and whatnot. For it was like career advice or something like that. Forget
Mhm.
exactly. Um, and they just mentioned that they're running this AI safety camp and that I should apply, or like I should host a project for it. So I did, and then I was like, hey, YOLO, whatever. And then the people that applied are actually cracked out of their minds. I had, you know, uh,
Yeah.
I got really, really, really good applicants. I
I bet
originally said,
I read your write up that was put on there, and it like I thought it was pretty clean. I thought it was well done. I personally am less uh I guess inclined towards mechanistic interpretability.
mhm,
Um but the questions that you're trying to answer I thought were like really interesting, and the way it was written, I think like just from my understanding would definitely attract some really good applicants. And so yeah, so you're in a situation now where you've got like I guess how many do you have, if you know? Did you
I
get?
have uh I have between 15 and 20.
Okay.
And let's see. Yeah, like I originally just wrote on my application thing that, like, I wasn't really I didn't know what to expect for like how many people would apply. I was maybe thinking
Uh,
like, maybe 5 people would apply, like students or whatnot. And like, you know, two of them have a PhD. Uh one of them has like, 1,000 citations or whatever. Uh
mhm.
like 5 of them have like at least 5 years of industry experience. Uh like almost none of them are like students. And I was like, damn, this
Yeah.
ambitious mechanistic interpretability project. We can actually be ambitious on it.
Yeah. I guess that's something I really like about AI Safety Camp is it feels like it's sort of giving control to people that wouldn't otherwise have it, just like
Yeah,
because they're publicizing your project on their platform, and like
yeah,
there are enough people that see it that uh like I found that in EA everyone says things along the lines of like, oh, you got to start working, you got to start doing things, but then there just aren't opportunities, and there isn't really a resource to, I guess, bridge you from like, okay, I've done that reading, like some of that initial reading, I've got that initial background that I need, to like I'm getting accepted into these programs, especially now as they're getting more and more competitive.
mhm,
Um, and so this is like, I guess what the reason that I wanted to do this is because it feels like people aren't getting hired, or people say like, oh, we just want more people in AI safety, but they don't want more people. They want more people with like very specific credentials and experience. And there are a lot of people who don't have that are wanting to participate, and like don't have an avenue to do that. And I think that all these projects, because I think there are like 29 different projects
yeah,
for AISC this year, or this version. Yeah, I just think it's like a really positive thing.
yeah, for sure. I'm totally in favor of this. Like, I think it's really, really nice that there are a bulk of projects and people can get involved relatively easily. Uh, if I can't accept them, then I think another project can. And if it doesn't fit the interests, I think there's a way. Like the if I originally wanted to take in 4 people, I think I'm probably going to take like 10. But like for the other 5 people that I'm not
Nice.
taking, it's like, it's like the cost of collaboration scales quadratically in the number of people, and so
Right.
I can't just take all 15 because there's a high cost to um, uh,
Organizing that many people.
yeah, probably managing and organizing a good research experience for a large team. If there's too high variance in the skill sets of team members, then there's a high cost to ensuring that people don't get lost and have tasks that are A, sufficiently well scoped, B, impactful, C, tractable, and D, fulfilling.
Yeah. And I guess just as a side note for what I find, like I feel like one of the things that would be valuable in participating in a program like MATS or something like that would be getting some mentorship on exactly those kinds of questions. As you're doing things, I guess like writing them down, I think could be really valuable. Of just like, here are the things that I'm thinking about. Here are the questions I'm asking myself. Here's how I'm answering them when I'm, thinking about this organizational process. And that'll help in the future because you'll have like thought about it a little bit more just in having written it down somewhere. And then also, uh, you can reference it and be like, okay, here's where some place that I could have done something better. Once you have enough experience, which again is not that much, but like you feel confident running projects like that and acknowledging like, yeah, this isn't necessarily going to be like 100%. This isn't the best project that these people have ever worked on necessarily, but it's a learning experience, and like everyone can benefit out of it.
On the other end, like in evaluating or asking people what their experience was in Serimaths and whatnot, like when I visited Berkeley,
Uh-huh.
it seemed that there was like a very high variance itself in like how much people got out of the program or the
Yes.
relative success of the program, like the projects in it. Like it seemed like, I mean, obviously it's hard to know how impactful your work will be before, but
Right.
it seems that there's a pretty important piece, I think, to mentorship uh, that was not uniformly addressed between the mentors.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, some people really wanted the flexibility to work on their own ideas, and part of the part of Stereomats was to sort of grow people in, you know, developing their own agendas and stuff like that. But
Right.
actually, like, concretely developing this, it's I think we could get by with having a lot more intentionality in this. Like, the current state of the art for getting the concrete, what is it, research taste? The best way to develop research taste right now is to do a PhD and then hopefully, scrape off the research taste in the background process of working with a professor close by for 4 years. And it's like,
Right.
no one's really found a better way to do this. And I don't think necessarily there will be a better way, but there should be at least, crappy proxies for it that we, at least think about actively. There's this like
Yeah.
a blog post by Chris Olah, goated dude, called Research Taste Exercises.
Chris Olah previously led interpretability at OpenAI and is one of the co-founders of Anthropic. He was also an editor of the Distill publication, which I mentioned earlier. The specific post that Alice mentioned is on his personal blog and is titled Research Taste Exercises. Olah presents concrete exercises that someone who wants to develop their research taste can do, with the idea being that although these exercises won't be as valuable as pursuing a research idea, they are much less costly, allowing for a substantially increased volume of feedback.
Developing the intuition for like what is valuable to work on in the first place without sinking in the months on it. This seems like a pretty high value like output of mentorship programs.
Yes.
And it seemed like it sure would be better if people were like explicitly cognizant of this goal when participating in them, so that the mentees can get the most out of their mentor, and the mentor can do the best they can for the mentee, and have like a much better relationship. I think like it seemed like in the batch of people that I talked to last time I visited, this was neglected in a good amount of the streams, but maybe addressed in others.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Yeah, I also got the sense that it was highly dependent on the mentor and like basically how good they were at being a mentor.
Mm-hmm. So this is like a soft, it's like a very difficult but soft process that personally I really want to emphasize in whatever mentorship things that I engage in on either side.
Right. Yeah, and I actually wrote like my own research plan for AI Safety Camp as well. And then someone else like at one of the MIT labs, they released a paper that like did it but better, which like of course they did because they had more resources and more experience. And like that's not a problem. That's actually good because it got done. It's just that I couldn't do the project. But
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like I'm strongly in favor of people getting experience as mentors as well.
Yeah, like like upon like looking at the applicants, I was like, wow, I feel a little overwhelmed, but also like, committed that I need to put a lot of effort in to make sure that these people, they get a good experience out of this, and it's actually
Right.
like fulfilling for them. This is like really important. It's surprisingly hard to get this right.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just like take people in and then hope it works. Like this almost never like just works out of the box. And I'm observing this a little bit in another program that's happening right now, SPAR, Supervised Program
Okay.
for Alignment Research. Uh, just like empirically observing a bunch of different themes, it seems like a lot of them organizationally are not working out well. And I think, communication uh, is like a highly neglected uh, aspect that should be emphasized uh, with a lot of deliberation.
I'm really want to talk about like how you are differentiating and like looking at the applications that you have received, because I think that's really interesting just to understand like how you're going about it.
I don't know if this approach scales, but I'm planning on talking to each person that applied with me one on one for 20 to 30 minutes or
Okay.
so. So 20, and I need to think about like, will I ask the same people the same question, or should I have a fixed uniform evaluation suite questions,
Uh-huh.
or should I just have some guiding principles to vibe check? This is something that I'm sort of thinking about, I guess.
One thing that I found is like a generally good question that is then, at least at its core the same, but goes different directions, is like ask them about a previous project and get them to talk about like their contribution and what they found most exciting about it, like why it was interesting. Because I found that those are the interviews, at least that I've done, where I've like feel relatively good about at least how I like what I presented. Because usually like the project is something that you were interested in and that you spent a lot of time with, and so you already have a stake in like explaining it and experience, talking about it with other people, and that can give like a really good idea of, okay, this is how a person's going to respond.
Yeah,
um, so
like,
that might be useful.
yeah, I definitely think so. Thanks for that. I think, yeah, more of these questions are good. More of this kind of thing where like it's like, it's personal, and it's also addressing like how collaboration works with them. And because uh, you know, two things are pretty important. One is like finding a fit that like we would work well together, and there is something that appeals to that person, uh, that they would work well on and vibe well with other people working on. It's kind of like mixes in with like figuring out what the structure is going to be. Another thing I want to do is like, once I have the people that I'm going to take in, I want to do some
Mhm.
sort of like social thing, which is like have some organized event where everyone talks to everyone. Uh, you know, we split up into breakup rooms or something like that and talk for 5 minutes in pairs with everyone. I think this will be pretty productive. To
Yeah,
like,
I think so for sure. I think it's just good to like get an understanding of what other people are doing. Another thing that I feel is valuable is it's sort of harder as you go beyond, I don't know, like 7 or 8.
mhm.
So it might be harder to implement, but having like an initial period of the meeting, I guess, that's like sectioned off for like updates and talking, um, that isn't necessarily part of technical, like what the project is working on, um, can help like establish, I guess, relationships and like rapport between different group members. Um, I think that's something that is missing in a lot of remote workplaces.
Mm-hmm.
that is like can be really useful for getting people to talk, which is difficult in online settings sometimes.
Totally 100% agree. Like it's like the general rule of, to have an active server, you need a meme channel on Discord. Otherwise, it's just
Mm-hmm.
not going to work because people are always like too uptight, or they feel the need for it to be serious to have a conversation. But a lot of like rapport building happens in these informal settings. So like having some like less strict format to convey thoughts. Uh, like explicit examples of like the value of having a meme channel. Like Eleuther AI's off-topic channel is like wild. Uh, I don't have enough time to engage with it, but like apparently the entire like stability AI company is like synthesized over throwing memes at each other in their off-topic channel, and the company's worth like $100 million now, or maybe $1 billion.
There you go.
Yeah, it's and it's just like 50 memesters come together that all share a common passion and are all interested in like sort of doing research, but also can have a good time together. And then you just like come together, and then you have a pitch deck, and then you let the money flow basically.
Yeah. So we mentioned this a while earlier. I wanted to hop back on like towards the evaluations for a second because I know you did a decent number of them, and I think it's an interesting phenomenon worth talking about. So, like in computer science and related fields to computer science, there are lots of coding evaluations like Code Signal or LeetCode or whatever. And this is also true for subfields in AI safety, at least many of them. And as far as I can tell, especially for mechanistic interpretability.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I think like for I guess this is coming back to like the sentiment that I had before that they're trying to select for uniqueness or something like that. But I guess it's interesting and strange to do. There's some things like some of them are definitely better evaluations than others. For example, some of them are like demo research, or like here have a spin at what is a distilled instance of what the kind of work we might be doing together. Um, Try to do work on it for 8 hours and then get back. And it's like I think this is really good. I mean, it's also a lot of effort, so you're like asking a lot for the people that apply. So like maybe you don't always want to do this because how do you compensate them for this time? Um,
right.
but I think these are high quality assessments that definitely lower the amount of people applying and filter through them effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so while these do have a bias for like towards EA, I think the bias is low enough that they're definitely still valuable to do. And so I
So
appreciated them. Yeah.
so this includes both like I guess like the research sprint kind of things and the coding evaluations.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the coding evaluations, but I understand that they're a very cheap proxy and filter.
Right.
But I'm thinking more about the research sprints and uh, the ones for Seri Maps, for example. There was a lot of like, here are these posts that I have written. Give me your thoughts on them. Or here are
Gotcha.
these like, I think these are really good, like both for like personal fit matching as well as like you know easy crowdsourcing of research ideas. And
Yeah.
uh, I definitely approve of this one. Like, here are my posts. Here's my research. Engage with it. And what are your what is your summary of the research, as well as what are your biggest disagreements with it? This is like a
Right.
very solid, relatively self-contained evaluation that hits a lot of bars for like what you are assessing for, cutting through noise, and can be made to be not too grueling of an exercise.
For sure. And yeah, I don't like the coding evaluations. I guess I don't.
It also depends on how engineering based, like what the people are looking for. If it is very
Yeah.
engineering based, then I suppose it works for other jobs, and then it works for this as well.
Yeah.
But the more that you lean into uh, conceptual territory or towards having elements that are outside of engineering, right? Thought-provoking elements outside of engineering, then evidently the coding evaluation is not sufficient. And things like directly engaging with work is like probably one of the best things that I've seen so far for evaluating.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I guess the downside is just time, like, which isn't that big of a downside. As people are already applying, they're already going to be spending time on this. And if you filter for the ones that are more dedicated just by having a slightly more involved application or evaluation, that's not necessarily like a super bad thing. Feels pretty shitty from the applier standpoint when you get like 5 of them and have to do them all over the course of a week. But
there's a balancing act. Like it's like, yeah, it's like, how do you filter effectively? Yes, you're demanding a lot from the people. I guess you automatically filter for the people who will even bother to do the work in the first place.
yeah.
Depends on how competitive it is. Like I think definitely by requiring such a thing, you will like have much less people apply.
Yeah.
Which is probably net good.
Yeah, probably net good, but you are, I guess, potentially reducing, like, losing some people who might have been really good, theoretically.
Yeah, there's like obvious trade-offs, but of them, probably some close to optimal.
And so how did you prepare for these, or how did you prepare for these, both the like coding evaluations and also the like research sprint kind of things?
Haha, the hackathon was my preparation.
Nice. Okay, cool. Did you feel like that worked out well for you?
Not for the coding evaluation, but for
Yeah.
the other parts, yes. I kind of got smoked on the coding evaluation, and then got filtered out from like all of the Seri Mats ones, which sucks.
Yeah, I did not love it. I I guess that's one downside too, is I feel like while it's good to be able to do that kind of coding fast, like it explicitly excludes a lot of what I think are the relevant things.
Yeah.
Like there's no NumPy, for example, and you're not working with PyTorch or anything like that. So like anything related to matrix and vectorization is like not assessed at all.
Yeah. So I was a bit peeved.
Yeah, same. All right. Cool. So we've been talking for a little bit now. I really appreciate you, like, I guess basically being my first official guest. Um,
Sweet, happy to be here.
yeah, and I have 2 more questions that I just want to ask first of like before you go. Um, which is, what's your least favorite part, or like most aggravating part, or hardest part to deal with of your research? So like mecha interp research and things that you've been doing recently.
So I guess at the end of the day, their coding evaluation is like pretty good. Because the thing that is most frustrating to me is like my relative inexperience with coding. Because I had to do like a lot of hacking things together and then testing them, and like I'd say about 60% of the time this goes smoothly. But then the 40% of the time that it doesn't go smoothly, this is like ends up being proportionally like longer to deal with. And yeah, debugging.
That's just what coding is, though. Like
Yeah,
that's
I know. So like maybe this is a bad answer. Um,
no. If your answer is like having to work through that coding, I think that's a great answer. Because I would agree. But that's probably one of my least favorite things is like trying to get something to work that you just know should work and isn't working for some weird syntaxical or otherwise like unrelated reason. I guess I was just saying that because the coding evaluations to me, it's like asking you to perform perfectly on something that's you're like not supposed to be performing perfectly on.
mhm.
And so I wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, well, it's because that's the part that I is not my favorite or that I struggle with. And the coding evaluation was like completely warranted, wholly reasonable, and doesn't have as many flaws as maybe I was thinking. Because like I think both can be true.
Here's one like I don't know how tractable this is of like an application pipeline, but here's one. Submit a PR to some code base of interest. I don't know how hard this is. Like maybe this is well, like depends largely on like how well organized the code base is in the first place. But for engineering positions that are like things to evaluate on that are outside the like the traditional pipeline of like a code signal or something like that is like resolving an issue or or
Right.
like contributing to the code base on like one of the for beginner issues basically.
Yeah. Oh, that actually reminds me. I have one more question before the last question, which was how did you decide what code to submit as your like demo?
I cannot answer this one well because I avoided all of the ones that required this.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I don't have anything that's like ML that was ready. So I submitted a package that I made for one of the papers I co-authored. Um, but it's like, I mean, it's technically related to machine learning. It's not related to neural networks, though.
Sometimes it's like good to share your GitHub if you have, good public code. But sometimes people only have like private repos for industry or for their research or whatnot. Sometimes they only have research code, which is like not necessarily like a demonstrative of the practices that you want to demonstrate.
Yeah.
Uh, and then sometimes people just don't put their code on GitHub or like a variety of other reasons. But like definitely this is a good way to demonstrate, right? Like you either have a website or you have uh, like a set of repositories that you have your personal ideas on.
Okay. And then the last question, which was meant to be paired with the not the one that I just asked, but the one before that, is what's your favorite part about the research that you're doing? And yeah, everything that you're doing right now. What's the part that gets you most excited? What do you love about it?
This is a really good question. My favorite part is exchanging ideas with other people. It's I guess if you have the right environment for it, it's nice. Um, I feel a little bit imposter syndrome on the quality of the answers that I'm giving. But
I don't think you should at all for two reasons. One, because like what you're saying resonates with me as well, and like, I mean, maybe I would feel the same way too, but I feel like everyone would feel that way, especially if you're an independent researcher. It doesn't really matter what stage you're at, as far as I can tell. Like, if you are technically not affiliated with someone, it's just easier to feel like you don't belong in that profession. But I think that's one of those feelings that's like not worth putting value on. And so like yeah, definitely understand what you're saying and appreciate it as like why you're saying it and that you feel that way, but just as a confirmation and like assurance that you shouldn't. And then of course that doesn't actually do anything, because just saying like don't feel that way isn't going to do anything, but still it's nice to hear a little bit.
Yeah. So I think one of the highest value things that I've done is invest a lot into a community. And now that I have a nice community of people interested in my field to talk to, it's just like, yeah, it's just really nice to have. Like, really, I wanted to sort of, you know, facilitate sort of interdisciplinary discussion. So, whatever background you have, and regardless of your relative seniority in that background, just sort of like have a means to get people together. And for me, this worked out well through a reading group, to just sort of like enable some sort of cross pollination of domains and intuition from people of different backgrounds. And this has been the part that I enjoy the most.
Nice. I guess, do you have anything that you want to like advertise or say or anything like that?
Yeah,
While you're
my server, ha ha ha. But I don't have a nice URL for it, so I don't know how it's gonna transmit.
Well, I'll figure something out.
I run a mechanistic interpretability Discord server, and there's a nice reading group on it. 10 to 15, sometimes 20 people join each week, and you get to talk to all of the experts from all these different fields, as well as just have an open platform to exchange ideas. It's quite nice. So there's a reading group, and then there's just discussion.
And I can confirm I went to last week's, and I'm going to try to go to tomorrow's as well. It was good conversation. I enjoyed like being able to share my thoughts, even though it was the first time that I was really there. And I think that in general, people had like really good perspectives and were very encouraging and helpful in like trying to understand. The paper we read last week was particularly confusing. So
classic academic, the perfection, right? Academic perfection. That's what it looks like.
oh yeah,
Very, very dense, confusing, crunched into 10 pages.
yeah. That's my least favorite part about like, I guess, academic writing is I feel like it should be so much more accessible. And like it can be, it just takes a little bit more effort. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, and I guess that's it for today.
Okay. Thanks for inviting me again.
It turns out that some of the AISC projects got many more applicants than they could accept, but Alice wasn't satisfied with telling so many people, even those who hadn't applied to her project specifically, that they couldn't join a group. So, Alice is now reaching out to over 50 people who applied for one of the evals or interp-focused groups, talking to each of them one-on-one, and creating additional project groups based on interest, experience, and commitment. These will all be facilitated through the mechanistic interpretability Discord, the one that hosts Alice's reading group, which I have linked at the top of the show notes. Oh, and there won't be an episode next week since it is Christmas, so the next episode will be released on January 1st, 2024. Thanks so much for listening. Now, I don't want to become one of those podcasts that has a 5-minute outro, so let me just say this. If you liked the format, if you like the questions we're asking, if you like how I'm doing things here, please let me know. Also, if you didn't like it, if you think that there are ways that I can improve what I'm doing that will make for better content and you will enjoy it more, please let me know. You can use the anonymous feedback form on the Into AI Safety website. You can also comment on any of the episodes on the Into AI Safety website, or you can email me at intoaisafety@gmail.com. I can't wait to hear from you guys. Anyways, till next time.